because there's the etiquette of getting on the mat, how you put on your uniform, cleanliness, all those things to how you respect one another. Um, so I would say on those things, there's a similarity. You when you walk into a winery, you clean everything. You clean your equipment you're about to use. You clean your thief if you're gonna take some samples out of the lab. You have your spray bottle, and so there's always that practice of cleanliness. And and then I break the rules and climb the barrels. That's what I love doing. But besides that, it's I would say that's one of the closest things. But when it comes to making the wine, I would say it's very similar. Um, it's very physical. If you do judo, we throw each other, we pin, we choke, we do all that. And then, of course, you're fighting your way out of that or trying to deliver. Um, while you're in a winery during harvest season, you're literally pulling over a heavy pump with, heavy hose, climbing and doing pump overs, doing punch downs on tanks with caps that are about, 3 feet thick. It's a workout. And so um, they both can be very physical, but both can be places of respect when you're working with other interns, other winemakers, cooperating. Because sometimes when it's a busy environment and you're in a custom crush, you have to share the space and learn to make do with things.
All right, welcome everybody back to the Barrels and Roots podcast. I've got an awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Dennis McCarter, and I'm also the owner and winemaker of McCarter Cellars. I started back in 2022 making Pinot Noir and Sauv Blanc. Since then, I'm now making more Pinot Noir and Zinfandel, Gewürztraminer, and Rosé. Everything that's made has won some pretty significant accolades. And yeah, glad to be here.
That's awesome, man. How did you get into wine? What was it that, you came from another career. What pulled you in strongly enough to make the leap into winemaking?
Well, I would say part of it was the change of the industry I was working in at the time, which was insurance.
Okay.
And I ran an insurance agent for about 13 years. And my hobby was making wine at home. And so 15 years ago, I was doing that. And finally, after the Tubman Nuns fires that kind of rocked the area, the rates really went up. And then I had reduced commissions. I had an office to keep open. And I was like, yeah, let me make a change. And then all my friends and family were like, "You should really get into wine." I'm like, "I'm just not sure. I'm not sure. There's not
Mm.
folks like me in the space. It's expensive to get in it." Um, but with that push and that faith from my family, that helped. But also my passion for wine. Because when it came down to it, I was like, you know what? Let me figure out what else to do. And I was like, yeah, let it be wine. So I sold my agency. I worked the harvest at a few wineries, one of them being Vinify, where I ended up making my wine at now. And they hired me as a cellar worker. I went back to school at the Center Junior College for enology, took a few courses, and did some assistant winemaking, and then survived the pandemic.
Right.
And from that, after that, I was like, well, I think it's time to start my car cellars as the world started waking back up again. And so start off with about uh, two 2 tons of Pinot Noir and 1 ton of Sauvignon Blanc. And I'm almost done selling my 2022 vintage of Pinot Noir. It came from Forchini Vineyards, and this is like right off of. Um, it's right next. It's in Hillsburg. It's right off of Old Redwood Highway, next to Acorn, across the street from. Uh, it's been a long day. The corner of Limerick Lane and Old Redwood Highway, and so if you see that on freeway, that's that beautiful vineyard. But I knew Andrew for a long time, and I would source from him as an amateur, and I also connected him to a few other commercial wineries. that sourced from him. So I went one commercial. He gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. I can't won't disclose it, but he gave me a good deal. And so I got about 2 tons of Martini clone. And 2022 was a pretty hot year. That was a year that we had 110-degree temperatures,
That's
and
right.
it oh, yeah, and so, normally, that's the time when you're worrying about ripening and, you're getting close, the bricks aren't moving, you're going out, you're walking, taking your random samples, and you're like, "Okay, staying at 20," and talk to another
Mm,
winery, and it's like, "Hey, are you guys getting the same specs?" They're like, "Yeah, I'm getting the same specs," and then all of a sudden, 2 days later, 26. And so the
mm.
significance of that is that's gonna be pretty high or pretty ripe, pretty ripe wine, and normally I wanna go for 24, so Rush got it, harvested, ended up, doing some chemistry on it, adding a little water, a little acid, did about 25% whole cluster, um, managed to ferment, and, sorry, I went off on another topic, but
No,
hopefully I answered your
it's
question.
it did, man. It's interesting because, um, my question, the follow-up question was gonna be about that, you know? When you think about your early days in winemaking and you were just getting started, what were the hardest lessons you had to learn the slow way, you know? It sounds like, right off from your first round of winemaking, you had some things that you had to navigate. What were the things that you were learning at that time?
Well, first getting into wine, yeah, it would be patience and attention to detail, and, and that started a lot in the garage for me, and so if you pick too early, you know, for making, to make your wines, you're not gonna get the right phenolics, the right flavor components. Um, but also if you choose to go on vacation and then come back and you have grapes that are 28 bricks, yeah, that can also be another thing. So attention to detail.
Mm.
Measuring. It's kind of like working in a wood shop. Measure twice, cut once. You can make an adjustment with your wine, try to go that same path because once you make it, it's hard to undo. And so those were 2 things, I do a lot is, like, double check, double check, double check.
One of the things that I like about what you're saying too is recently I went and did some leather working with my daughter. We made some leather, and, when I was making things with her, luckily the teacher pre-cut everything. And she's like, "Well, I wanna cut it." And I said, we will." And she went and cut her own leather, and then afterwards, she was like, "It doesn't fit." I was like, "Because it's something that you have to be exact." You have to really keep it the right size, the right shape, everything has to match up. And when it doesn't, you get into trouble. And we don't always realize that the exactness of things and the importance of that. I make videos, and video content is what I do. And if I'm syncing up audio and video, after this, I'll do some audio cleanup on what we do, remove some noise, make us sound more fantastic. But if I then reapply that audio and it's not completely lined up, we're going to be, it's gonna have this really weird
Oh, yeah.
effect.
Mhm.
Perfection is important, and having that attention to detail is really important. And sometimes perfection is the attention to detail is realizing that things are to a degree imperfect, but then how can you adapt from that at the same time, you know?
Exactly, exactly. Sometimes you gotta accept it for what it is, like, there's some things you can correct, like, if you have hydrogen sulfide in your wine, um, yeah, a little air may help, or a little copper sulfite, what may undo, um, but then, if there's a little Brett of Mices, most people don't wanna admit that, but a little bit of Brett's okay. That's not,
Mm.
so it's like funk, you know, Bootsy Collins, then there's P-Funk, Funkadelics. Um, a little bit's okay. Too much can be, yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. Like we you get I love, that sometimes I remember my daughter was painting a picture. She has an art class that she loves, and she knocked over, some paint, And when she knocked over that paint, what happened was, um, it caused all these, like, little dots across her painting that she'd done, and she was so frustrated. And luckily, the teacher was there, and she's like, calm down. We can put this in." You dump the whole the whole thing of some paint, well, that's kinda hard to fix, but, these little imperfections, you can learn to work with them, to dance with them, and to make them
Yeah.
a little bit more manageable, if that makes sense.
In a way, it kind of goes back to martial arts. There's a certain part of giving way. So you become applicable, apply yourself to change.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and that was gonna be my next question is, like, you teach judo and make wine, where do you see the strongest overlap between martial arts training and winemaking?
Oh, so many, so many. Because there's the etiquette of getting on the mat, how you put on your uniform, cleanliness, all those things to how you respect one another. Um, so I would say on those things, there's a similarity. You when you walk into a winery, you clean everything. You clean your equipment you're about to use. You clean your thief if you're gonna take some samples out of the lab. You have your spray bottle, and so there's always that practice of cleanliness. And and then I break the rules and climb the barrels. That's what I love doing. But besides that, it's I would say that that's one of the closest things. But when it comes to making the wine, I would say it's very similar. Um, it's very physical. If you do judo, we throw each other, we pin, we choke, we do all that. And then, of course, you're fighting your way out of that or trying to deliver. Um, while you're in a winery during harvest season, you're literally pulling over a heavy pump with, heavy hose, climbing and doing pump overs, doing punch downs on tanks with caps that are about, 3 feet thick. It's a workout. And so um, they both can be very physical, but both can be places of respect when you're working with other interns, other winemakers, cooperating. Because sometimes when it's a busy environment and you're in a custom crush, you have to share the space and learn to make do with things.
That's awesome because I also study martial arts and there are days where things go your way and days where
Oh yeah,
things do not, you know? You have a day where you're on top of the world and the next day you're having to pivot. It question especially in judo, you're going for a throw and someone's like, "Yeah, that's not happening today." And suddenly you're laying on your back on the mat going, "How did I miss that?" And it's interesting because, I mean, when you're doing winemaking, um, I am no winemaker, but I from interviewing a lot of people, it sounds like there are days where the wine has its own mind, and it decides that you're like, "Let's go right," and it's like, "Let's go left," you know? And one of the things I wanted to ask you about that is because when you are in a situation like that, how do you adapt or pivot? What are some of the things that you do to kind of sit there and go, all right, how can we, shift and respond to this new reality as we wake up today?
I would say just patiently monitor it. If it's something that's just takes time, like sometimes sulfur, like you just sulfur the wine and it's one of the barrels may just have a aroma that smells like matchsticks. You're like, okay, this is still smelling like matchsticks, but it just got sulfured a week ago. Okay, is it going to taste any better? Smell any better? Let it go. Let it be. Um, I try not to let myself get too crazy when things don't work out. Um, except for one time, I had to deal with a stuck fermentation, and I still have to handle that carefully. It's just okay. I'm losing. I gotta restart this, and so it became my almost my obsession to fix. But I was glad when I did the restart and it started getting to dryness that I wanted. It was almost done too. What ended up happening was my bin was outside. It got over 100. It reached 100 degrees because we had a heat spike, and I couldn't control my bin being outside, unfortunately, because there was many other bins. And the thermal temperature inside was already, the kinetic energy was already happening and inside the bin, but it was frying the yeast. And so there wasn't enough yeast to finish the job. And so I had to restart that and do all the measurements to make sure I had enough water to do the restart, add enough nutrient. Not to go into the details, it was annoying. Restarts are usually a headache, and you could lose hair over it. But yeah,
I wanted to ask you this, and forgive me if I mess up the word, but you mentioned Jita Kyoe.
just to
Um,
give that, yes.
yeah, mutual benefit and prosperity. How does that idea show up in the way you run a winery or build community around your work? What is that concept?
Well, just a key away, and you said it perfectly. Another way is you mean shining together, you mean moving forward together, or win-win.
Mm.
And so having those opportunities where it's like, well, here's some interns are going to be working with on my wines. I better treat them nice, those kind of things.
Right?
To this being humble enough around the people around you, being willing to help, and sometimes that help returns back to you. Not hogging all the equipment, it's another one. Um, so I say is in judo we cooperate with our partner, which is part of that Jitaki way, and so it's not like doing kata. You got to have a partner to really understand the principles of some of those techniques. And it helps having good partners around you in the winery to watch out for you, because there's some things you may miss. And and I said, hey, you didn't put a bone in. I'm like, thank you. You saved my wine. You're gonna make it taste that much better. So
I love that because we all build together. Everyone thinks that even the person who has made it has had people that helped them a lot along the way. Like people who were the people that they were leaning on and guiding them and helping them, and if you can't see the mutual, like benefit of taking care of them and them taking care of you, you're crazy. I have a team that does my video editing, and the other day my suitcase got lost.
I know.
I flew to the US, flew all over the world, through Qatar, and when I came back, my suitcase was sitting in Chicago, and I had already passed through Qatar and Vietnam, and, like, I'm sitting there, they're like the airline was like, "We are so sorry, we found your suitcase." I was like, "Great." They're like, "It's still in America." I was like, "Not great." But they're like, "We're gonna compensate you a certain amount of money and, for your inconvenience." And I sat there and I had suddenly this, amount of money, and I was like I looked at it and I came in and a couple of my workers were just sitting there and like, "Oh, my back's sore." And I was like, "Well, why is your back so sore?" They're like, "Well, the chairs that we got here kind of suck." I was like, "All right, well, let's buy some new chairs." They're like, "You don't have to." I was like, "Well, no, man, you guys help me. I'm going to help you and get you something really comfy and, squishy, like kind of lean in on." And, but my point is like, I wasn't buying it just for them. I was buying it for me and I was buying it but we all benefit. Like they got a nicer place to work. They want to show up to work. They have a better day sitting there and don't feel achy. That benefits me, so it's like
Yes,
we all build together at the same time. And anyone who thinks that you operate inside of a vacuum is crazy. It's like, it's not how life works.
exactly, exactly. It takes a village.
It does. But I want to ask you this one because every winemaker has a moment when they feel, okay, I actually know what I'm doing now. Did you have a moment like that where it all clicked and you started going like, wow, this is coming together?
Yes and no. I feel like I did well with everything I've made, but I guess when you ask that question, I think of it more like kind of like the same thing in martial arts. You can't know everything, so you got to keep practicing. You got to keep the practice, and so year by year, harvest by harvest. But I would say when I felt like I was beginning to make some good stuff was probably one of my first times I made a white wine, and
Hmm.
I did it at home, and it was the crude way. It was because you don't have a stainless steel tank with glycol system jackets that can go around. You have a tub of water and frozen water bottles and a carboy. And I made this beanie. I co-fermented it at about as low as it could go. So I'm assuming it was maybe around 50 ish. And I would cycle those water bottles out to have it finish dry eventually, which took about a little bit over a month. And they got like double gold, and family members loved it. The only problem was I made 2 cases. That's not a lot, so it
Mm.
disappeared fast.
Mm.
But year after year, when they got the accolades, I was thinking, okay, I think I'm doing all right, and I think this wine's all right. And I still, even today's time, because took on many accolades since starting the car Cellars commercially. Um, I still feel like, I have it down on making wine, but I still have something to learn. I still have a lot to learn. I look forward to it.
There's always you study martial arts, the idea of, like, that mushin, the beginner's mind. There's always something to learn, and,
Yes.
every single day that you step into the arena, the training mat, the dojo, you got something that you can refine, and, you know, one of the things that's fascinating to me because people think winemaking is, I don't even think they understand what it's all about, but, like, what I'm starting to see is, wine is all about farming. I love that you described one of your Pinot, and you were talking about the exact place. You knew exactly where your wine came from and where those grapes came from, and so there's this place and the people that put the energy into that, and then, you
Yes.
get into this dance of chemistry, but there's also art and a whole bunch of patience all mixed together, which part do you personally feel most connected to of that whole process?
Oh man, it's kind of multiple, but I would say walking the vineyard, and seeing the grapes, seeing the babies grow, and having that moment where it's quiet outside and it's my time with my row I'm sourcing from. But also when I'm in the winery and I'm processing my fruit, I'm monitoring the fermentation, managing a pump over and punch down. And especially when I'm doing a pump over, I play my favorite music, which is usually some soul music. And and just having that moment with, my project. And that's it's like cooking. When you're in your zone, it's just it's spiritual. When you're seeing this raw product transform into something that's gonna be delicious, most likely in the end, and it's gonna bring people together, and it's gonna be celebratory, usually for most people. Or yeah.
I love that, man. Well, now you got me thinking, what's your go-to playlist? What are some of the unconditional
Oh man.
songs that have to be on there?
Well, I'll have to share my Great Crush mix on Spotify. But it's a little mix of everything, but soul music is my main thing. So I do, Lucky Day, Frankie Beverly, D'Angelo, but then I'll have a little bit of grunge, a little bit of Stone Temple Pilots, um, Prince, Lenny Kravitz, um, Filter, Daft Punk. It can go in ranges of everything, but if I'm doing a punch down, give me Daft Punk, you know?
Mm,
But if I'm doing a pump over, give me some love making music. I
mm,
want
mm.
that juice flowing. So,
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. Well, I was thinking about this, like, because music changes everything, and you're right. Like, I was setting up a playlist the other day, and I was thinking about like music to focus to, music to get shit done,
mhm.
music to, relax to. And I was thinking about it because like every time I fly, I've got, some noise canceling headphones, and it's the only way I'm able to do like these long haul flights between Asia and the US. But
Mhm.
like I'll bring with me like I still have a Sony Walkman, and I put on there my playlists, and man, there's certain things like what was it the other day that I was listening to on that flight? I had some jazz playing, I had some Coltrane, but then, like, at certain point in time, I needed to get work done, and, like, dude, Daft Punk is a go-to.
Yes.
It just It is a go-to, and I'm a huge fan of the Daft Punk Tron soundtrack, like, I love that soundtrack.
Oh
It just
yes,
it's something that I get work done for days when that's playing, you know?
it's on my playlist too. Yeah.
Right?
Oh
Well,
yeah.
I wanna ask you this, what do you think modern wine culture gets right, and what do you think it sometimes forgets?
Yeah, it's not limited to one demographic. Historically, it's many cultures at some point made wine, and so like my family was, in the beginning, like, "You're into what white folks do." I'm like, "You know, our people make wine too," you know. And this was many years ago, but I had to educate them on the, it's like, "Hey, this is not just a European thing. This is not just a Asian thing. This is not just this is a human thing." And so, historically, you could look far back, Georgia, wine was made. And we know parts in Africa, wine was made. And we know wine was made here, obviously. And so I think that's one of the things. Then the misconception of sulfites. And so he was like, oh, sulfites are bad. And I was like, well, okay, well, there's more sulfites in your frozen French fries than there is in your glass of wine. The whole bottle, actually. There's more. Let me say that again. Yeah, there's more sulfites in your French fries than there is in a bottle of wine. Um,
Hmm.
and so, if the wine is bothering you, it may be something else you might be allergic to.
Right? It's interesting too that I think that one of the things that I'm seeing is that we have all these preconceived ideas about wine. And people come to the wine conversation with bias right from the beginning, and I don't know whether it's from pop culture and modern
Mhm.
media. I mean, you see it in the movies, like, all of these people that drink wine are like, more of kinda like wine snobs type of a thing, like, "Oh, let's get this wine," and, like, the reality is everyone that I know drinks wine, and it's not pretentious, it's very relatable, and these are relatable people, and I think that I hope that we can start changing the preconceived ideas that people have about wine, because to me, wine is for everyone. I mean,
Yes.
everyone over 21, you know?
Oh, well, yeah. What? Yes, you said it right. Ditto.
Yeah, yeah, wine
But
is for
yes,
everyone, and how can we get people to understand that and how can we make wine more approachable?
I would say start having more events that are friendly to all ages. Well, except for anyone 21 years and over, that have an outreach and saying, "Hey, partake," and no, you don't have to have a nice dress or wear a suit. It's not meant for bougie events, but it's like, okay, you want to taste wine, you want to taste flair, here, food wine pairings, which some County is really good with. Having that a food and wine affair events that we have out here. We have the North Coast Wine Challenge, or North Coast Festival, where they have the best foods, best wines, and people can buy a ticket and go out and try the local award-winning wineries. And I think having those events help bring exposure and saying, okay, here's a small producer or a big producer, regardless, and here's some food that's right next to. And I think that helps folks realize, oh, wine is meant to be consumed with food. And so see how the food elevates the wine and vice versa. And maybe they'll make them want to have a glass of wine, for dinner. Not every day, but maybe some days.
Mhm. Well, it's interesting too because I think that, um, one thing that I have and I talk about all the time on this podcast is I think that the wine industry has really focused in on certain segments of the population, and like mainly age demographics is like, there was for a long time that, wine drinkers were seemingly boomers and that, not a problem with that, but like I feel like, I have friends. I was looking at this demographic, like what people drink in different regions. And like I live in Asia part time and I live in California the rest of the time. And one of the things is when I go to drink, we had a work party and everyone was drinking beer for my company. And I pulled out a bottle of red and I was like, all right, guys, try this. And people were just like blown away, you know. and not in a way that they were like, I would have hoped. I would like, I love this wine, and I just like, oh, this is delicious, and they're just like, what in the hell is this? And I'm like, but there was a couple people that were, like really like, oh, this is like not bad. But it was like it's exposure thing, and then I pulled out some food to pair it with, and people were like, now this is cooking. Now we're cooking, and like they were really interested and want to get into it, but it took me kind of giving them a door opening experience to like eh, get in there, and I wonder how can we make it so that we are really tapping into, because it's like this too, like it's a way smarter thing to like tap into multiple markets than to just, I had this one guy on to my other podcast last night talking about content, and he runs a translations, like a dubbing AI software that automatically dubs into other languages for YouTube videos. And he says what happens when you start reaching out into these other demographics is suddenly, dude, people are crushing it, hundreds of millions of new fans, because before, people in South America couldn't understand Mr. Beast. Now it's straight dubbed into like Portuguese for Brazil and Spanish for the rest of South America. Like, if you can look at these other markets, like, dude, suddenly doors open if you're willing and able to sit there and go, maybe we don't have to just sell to only this group. We can get it to everyone.
I completely agree. I completely agree. It's a matter of how to catch them, and I think part of it's social media because most of the next generation, they're on social media already. And when you really look at some of the big wineries, and I won't mention any names, but for you that we're all familiar with, you'll be able to see a post from them maybe every maybe once a month, or maybe every 2 weeks, and the exposure's not there. So they have a
Yeah.
following. So like, you don't have to do that because we have this following, but that following is dying off. And so it's important
Right.
to use all forms of marketing. Yes, you're in magazines, people still pick up magazines, but yeah, get someone to take care of your social media. And that's a job in itself, of course, that you come to realize. But have someone manage that and on a daily basis, reach out to any customer that does, anyone that's interested in wine. And so I think that's one of the things that would need to change with many of the businesses is how they market on social media. So
I love that, man. Well, teaching judo means guiding people through discomfort and repetition. How has teaching shaped how you lead teams in the cellar?
I would say leading by example. So be the one willing to do it first, demonstrate how it's done, which though I'm I was an intern slash winemaker over harvest season. I still get some of the duties of, okay, here's how you use a pump. Here's how you take a lap sample. Um, those kind of things. And but always have patience. Always have patience and be understanding. People make mistakes. And so not to shove their nose in the dirt and say, get out of my house. And it's the same thing, in the dojo setting. It's like, okay, well, you did this wrong. Here's what we can do to improve it. And so when the mistake's not too costly, there's still an experience to be had. But but yeah, patience. Patience is that main thing, I would say.
I love that. I think that, I didn't understand patience until I became a father. Right now, my wife is traveling. My daughter woke up. I don't feel so good. Gave her some medicine. As soon as we're done, I'm going to run her up to the doctor. And like, you sit there and you look at parenting and being a father, or being, a parent of any sort, and you sit there, whether it be a parent to animals, man, you're like, our fur babies also have some drama. I gave my dog something delicious the other day, and it was vomit everywhere for about 5 hours. And I was just like, I don't know why that happened. But, I think that I love things that teach patience. I love analog photography, and I talk about it a lot on this podcast because I feel like there are a lot of overlaps with winemaking. You put your passion into something, but you don't get to see the results for a while. And um, the other day, I did a full roll, and I was so excited. I took it in to develop it, and I messed up something, and it was just it was not what I was thinking, and I had to sit there and go, find that patience with myself to sit there and go, "You know what? It is what it is." It's like, with my daughter, she didn't wanna be sick today, but we adapt. I've got a busy day at work, but you know what? I'm gonna be working from home, and we'll make it work, because life is about pivoting, and I think winemaking is a lot about that as well.
I agree. I agree. It's because you pivot, you adapt, because it doesn't always do what you want it to do sometimes, and though you can guide it. And but yes, think you said it right in that correlation between parenting, because I have a 19-year-old, so I've been at the part where you're at with a kid, and same thing. It takes patience and understanding and realizing they're gonna make mistakes and hopefully grow from it. And we're gonna make mistakes
100%,
too, and we grow from it.
right? If someone is just starting out their own path in wine later in life, what advice would you give them that you wish you had early on?
Well, to do an internship. So if you're young, you want to get started in winemaking, and the good best way is do an internship. Usually, there's a crash course, a mentorship, and then next few months, as long as you don't mind working every day and not getting a lot of sleep, um, you'll learn a lot, and you'll find out real fast if you're a fit for it. Then to make some wine at home, like whether it's a kit, which I've never done. I've always done fresh grapes personally, but however you do it, try making someone at home, and you get some of the equipment. The resources are out there. Um, and then if you really want to take the next step, go to school, study enology. Whether it's UC Davis or it's a junior college that offers wine studies. Um, those are paths I would say to start taking. And I get that advantage because you need education in order to be a winemaker nowadays, and not just work your way up. They want to see either a master's degree or a bachelor's degree of science. And so if you have that figured out ahead of time, get those credentials.
That's awesome, man. What's your favorite wine? What's your go-to wine that you're just gonna sit there, you wanna have a relaxing day? What are you gonna open up right now?
Well, my go-to lately is Zen. When it's cold and it's that time of year, it's like the Zen that's 15% alcohol, just enough to warm me up a little bit, have a hearty meal. But at the same time, I drink a lot of Pinot. I drink a lot of Pinot, but I hold on to my Zins for special occasions. Um, but normally I'm kind of like an almanac of wine drinking. So it depends on my mood, weather, and what I'm eating. Um,
Right.
but lately it's been it's been Zen, and so I make a Zen for Rock Pal, and then of course I enjoy Zen from Von Duffy, a few producers that is. But, and some of the Wilson brands I enjoy as well. So I consume a lot of it. I've made a lot of it. So yeah, it's a beautiful grape, beautiful wine.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. If someone's new to wine and you gotta pour them 3 glasses, what 3 glasses are you pouring for them?
I'm going to start them off with something obscure. So I would pour them either a Riesling or a Gewürztraminer. That's something aromatic, um, but yet, especially Riesling. I'll pour them a Riesling, aromatic, acidic, but it's quite enjoyable. I would pour a Pinot, and then I would pour a big hearty red. It will probably be it'll probably be a cab. It'll probably be a cab, and or some sort of Bordeaux blend. Because you have your middle middle of the road wine, red wine. You have your big heavy red wine. Then you have your aromatic white wine, and all those have their place. That some like one or the other, but all it could be depending on your mood. It could be depending on what you're eating. If I was having fish tacos, give me that Riesling. Dry Riesling, by the way, when I say that. If it's pork, give me Pinot Noir. If it's a beef stew, give me that cab or that Bordeaux blend. And So yes, those will be the 3 glasses.
That's awesome, man. Where can people go to find out more about you and the wines that you make?
So you can find my wines at McCarterCellars.com, and I offer a wine club, and I do ship to most states. And then for those that are watching this and they're in Sonoma County, I'm at Penny Grove Market, Bottle Barn, Grossman Noshery. That was a restaurant. Jackson's Bar and Oven, localish, in quite a few spots locally. But I do have a tasting room in Santa Rosa. It's Identify, and it's by appointment only. So just give me a call or email. We can schedule that. And I even allow barrel thieving. So if you've never had a barrel thieving experience where you get a taste out of the barrel, I can provide that with a tasting.